You see it every day. That struggle with friends. The laser focus on one very specific thing. The massive meltdowns over what feels like the smallest possible change. You've Googled ADHD, and yeah, some of it fits, but the label just doesn't feel like it captures the whole story. So you've wondered about autism. But your kid is social. They talk. They even make eye contact. Well, sometimes. So where on earth do you go from here? How do you even start to untangle all of this? If you feel like you're staring at two overlapping puzzles, trying to find where one ends and the other begins, I want you to know that this is one of the most common and frustrating feelings for parents of neurodivergent kids. You are not alone, and you are definitely not wrong for being confused. From the outside, the behaviors can look almost identical. In this video, we're going to uncover 7 subtle signs that parents often miss. But we're not just going to look at the behaviors. We're going to dig deeper into the why behind them. Understanding that internal motivation is the absolute key to telling the difference between high-functioning autism and ADHD. And you will definitely want to stick around for sign number 5. It's a behavior that looks so similar on the surface that it trips up just about everyone, often leading to a massive, overwhelming meltdown. But the neurological reason it happens is a world apart. Knowing that difference can change everything about how you support your child. Before we jump in, let's have a quick chat about the term high-functioning autism. You've probably seen it and even used it in your own late-night research. It's a phrase many people use to describe autistic individuals who have average or above-average intelligence and don't have big speech delays. However, the clinical and autistic communities have mostly moved away from it. Today, the official diagnosis is autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, with different levels to describe the amount of support a person might need. Many people who would have once been called high-functioning might now be diagnosed with ASD level 1. We're using the term in our title because we know it's what so many parents are searching for when they're in that confusing, overwhelming first phase. Our goal here is to meet you exactly where you are and give you some clarity. Throughout the video, I'll be using ASD or autism, but I want you to know we're speaking directly to your experience of having a bright, verbal kid whose struggles don't seem to fit neatly into any single box. Sign number 1, reduced social and emotional responsiveness. Let's start with something that is often the first thing parents feel, even if they can't quite put a name to it. It's a difference in that back-and-forth social connection. This is often the first thing parents feel. A child may show a reduced response when their name is called, offer limited eye contact, or exhibit fewer spontaneous expressions of joy, like smiling back at you. It can feel like you're not quite on the same emotional wavelength. This isn't about being cold or unaffectionate. It stems from a fundamental difference in what's called social emotional reciprocity, which is a core diagnostic criterion for autism. They may have difficulty interpreting social cues or sharing their own internal states, which can look like a reduced level of engagement. A child with ADHD can also struggle with social responsiveness, but for entirely different reasons. Their social understanding is usually intact, but their inattention gets in the way. They might not respond when you call their name, not because they are unaware, but because they are so intensely focused on something else that they genuinely don't hear you. They might not smile back because they were distracted by a bird outside the window at that exact moment. The social desire is there, but their attention is constantly being pulled away, making their responsiveness feel inconsistent and unpredictable. Try to get your child's attention when they are engaged in an activity. Does it consistently take multiple tries to get them to look up, even when the activity isn't a high-interest one? Do they seem to look through you rather than at you? A potential autism sign. Or do they fail to respond when they are absorbed in something exciting, but respond immediately once the distraction is removed, often with a, "Huh? What?" as their brain catches up? A potential ADHD sign. One is a difference in social processing. The other is a battle for attention. Sign number 2, lack of joint attention. This next one is a hidden milestone that pediatricians look for, and it's a huge clue in telling the difference between these two conditions. It's called joint attention. Joint attention is that instinct to share an experience. When a neurotypical child sees a dog in the park, they'll often point, then look back at their parent to share the moment, as if to say, "Are you seeing this too?" A 2017 study by Mundy and colleagues highlights that for an autistic child, this skill is often impaired. They might be very interested in the dog, but the instinct to look back and share that interest with you is often missing. They also may struggle to spontaneously show you things just for the sake of sharing. This points to a core difference in the drive to create a shared social world. A child with ADHD is typically buzzing with joint attention. They absolutely want to share the world with you. The problem isn't the desire, but the execution. They'll see the dog, shout, "Dog!" and look at you with wide, excited eyes. But their impulsivity and hyperactivity take over. Before you can even share the moment, they're already running towards the dog, forgetting to check for cars or other people. They might bring you a toy to show you, but have already looked away at something else before you can respond. The social connection is there, but it's constantly being short-circuited by a brain that can't stay regulated. In a new environment, point to something across the room. Does your child follow your point but not look back at you to confirm you're both looking at the same thing? A potential autism sign. Or does your child follow your point, get excited, but then get distracted by 3 other things along the way and start talking about something completely different? A potential ADHD sign. One struggles to initiate that shared experience. The other initiates it but can't sustain it. Sign number 3, atypical language, echolalia and little professors. Next, let's listen not just to what your child says, but how they say it. Both can be very talkative, but the quality and style of their language can be a major signpost. You might notice your child repeating phrases from movies or conversations, a behavior called echolalia, long after their peers have moved on to original sentences. This isn't meaningless repetition. It's a tool for communication, self-soothing, or participation when they can't generate a novel response. Another hallmark is little professor speech. This is when a child uses language that sounds incredibly formal or sophisticated for their age, especially when discussing a special interest. The speech can feel more like a lecture than a conversation, sharing vast amounts of information but often missing the back-and-forth rhythm that signals true social connection. A child with ADHD is often the classic chatterbox, but their speech patterns are different. They don't typically use overly formal language. Instead, their talking is driven by fast-moving thoughts and low impulse control. They interrupt, blurt things out, and finish your sentences, not to be rude, but because they are afraid the thought will vanish if they don't say it right now. Their conversation is a whirlwind tour of topics, jumping from one idea to the next as new thoughts pop into their head. The social challenge isn't a misunderstanding of conversation. It's an inability to regulate the impulse to speak. Pay attention to the purpose of the conversation. Is your child primarily sharing facts and information with less emphasis on your reaction or contribution? A potential autism sign. Or is your child constantly seeking your reaction, interrupting, and pulling the conversation in a dozen new directions based on impulsive thoughts? A potential ADHD sign. One is a detailed report. The other is a pinball machine of thoughts. Sign number 4, difficulties with pretend play, pretense. Let's look at the world of make-believe. How a child plays is a huge clue. And a subtle but distinct sign is how they handle abstract pretend scenarios. This is a subtle but distinct sign. An autistic child may struggle to imagine one object is another, like pretending a banana is a telephone or a box is a boat. This challenge with pretense is often tied to a deeper difficulty in understanding that other people have different thoughts and feelings, a skill known as theory of mind. A 2015 study by Hutchins et al. found that autistic children scored lower than both typically developing children and children with ADHD on tasks measuring this kind of applied social understanding. Their play is often more literal and concrete. A child with ADHD is often a master of pretend play. Their mind is a fountain of spontaneous, creative ideas. That banana is a phone, then a spaceship, then a magic wand, all in the span of a minute. The problem isn't a lack of imagination. It's the lack of sustained engagement. Their play is often chaotic and exploratory, leaving a trail of 10 different games started but abandoned as a newer, shinier idea takes over. They thrive on novelty and improvisation, creating rich worlds that lack a coherent story because their attention is constantly being pulled to the next interesting thing. Hand your child a cardboard box. Does your child have difficulty seeing it as anything other than a box? Perhaps choosing to sit in it or put toys in it, but not spontaneously turning it into a car or a house? A potential autism sign. Or does your child immediately declare it's a rocket, drive it around the room, then get bored and try to wear it as a hat before abandoning it for another toy? A potential ADHD sign. One struggles with the symbolic leap. The other makes a dozen leaps in a row and forgets where they started. Sign number 5, sensory processing sensitivities. Okay, this is the one I told you to stick around for. This sign often leads to the exact same behavior, a huge meltdown. But the internal reason it happens is profoundly different. Does your child have a meltdown over a clothing tag or a loud blender? For autistic individuals, differences in sensory processing are a core feature. They may be sensory over-responsive, where the input itself is perceived as genuinely distressing or even painful. That tag isn't just itchy, it can feel like sandpaper. That blender isn't just loud, it's a physical assault on their nervous system. The meltdown is a state of neurological panic, not a tantrum. They aren't overreacting. Their brain is wired to experience the sensation this intensely. Many kids with ADHD also have sensory issues, but the underlying reason is often different. The challenge for the ADHD brain is less about the sensory input being painful and more about the inability to filter out irrelevant information. That same blender noise might not hurt, but it shatters their ability to focus, leading to agitation and frustration. They might also be sensory seeking, with a persistent need for fast movement or a constant urge to touch everything. A 2024 study by Brandis Aitken and colleagues found that sensory-seeking behaviors were more strongly associated with heightened ADHD scores. The meltdown is often a release of frustration from a brain overloaded with input it can't regulate. Observe what happens right after the sensory event. You leave the noisy party or turn off the vacuum. Does your child need a long time to recover in a quiet, dark space, remaining dysregulated and distressed? This is more typical of autistic overwhelm. Or, once the trigger is gone, do they shake it off and quickly channel that pent-up energy into hyperactivity, like running or jumping? More typical of ADHD dysregulation. One is recovering from pain. The other is discharging overwhelming stimulation. Sign number 6. Stereotypical and repetitive play. We've talked about imagination, but now let's look at the overall pattern of play. What your child does when left to their own devices is incredibly telling. Watch how your child uses toys. Instead of pretending a car is driving to the store, they might engage in stereotypical play, like spinning the wheels repeatedly or lining up all their cars in a perfect row. This pattern of restrictive and repetitive behavior is a core sign of autism. In fact, one study cohort found this pattern in over 82% of the autistic children studied. The joy here isn't in creating a story, but in creating order. This repetition provides a sense of calm and predictability in a world that can feel chaotic and overwhelming. Play for a child with ADHD is usually the opposite: chaotic, disorganized, and driven by a need for novelty. Their playroom looks like a creative tornado hit it, with multiple toys and games strewn about. They bounce from one activity to the next, driven by what's new and exciting. They don't line toys up. They crash them, build with them, and then abandon them when a new idea strikes. The goal isn't creating order. It's chasing stimulation. The mess is just the evidence of a brain exploring a dozen different ideas in an hour. Give your child a set of colorful blocks. Does your child focus on sorting them meticulously by color or shape, or building the exact same structure they always build? Is the goal the process and the pattern? A potential autism sign. Or does your child start building something, get distracted, decide the blocks are now projectiles, and then completely forget about them as they run off to do something else? A potential ADHD sign. One finds comfort in structure, the other chases stimulation. Sign number 7, chronic gastrointestinal, GI, distress. Finally, let's talk about a sign that is the missing link for so many parents and is now backed by a growing body of research: gut health. This is a huge one. Research shows a massive overlap between autism and chronic gut issues. One groundbreaking 2026 analysis by Zhang et al. Highlighted the prevalence of issues like chronic constipation, seen in 70.6% of their cohort, and diarrhea, 35.3%. The study suggests these GI issues are not random, but are linked to the gut-brain axis, where specific genetic variants can impact both gut health and behavior. So if your child is constantly struggling with stomach pain, constipation, or diarrhea, it's not just a separate medical issue. It could be a critical piece of the neurodivergent puzzle. GI issues are also surprisingly common in ADHD, but the link may be different. Research points to a connection between ADHD and functional GI disorders like irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. The cause is thought to be related to things like dysregulation in the nervous system, higher levels of stress and anxiety which impact the gut, or even side effects from medication. While gut issues are present, they are often seen as a co-occurring condition influenced by ADHD's core traits of dysregulation and emotional intensity, rather than being linked to the specific genetic and microbial markers currently being identified in autism research. Talk to your doctor about your child's GI symptoms and ask about the gut-brain connection. When discussing behaviors, do you notice that periods of intense GI distress, like severe constipation, seem to directly correlate with a worsening of behavioral symptoms, sensory sensitivities, and meltdowns? A pattern often reported by parents of autistic children. Or do the GI issues seem more related to periods of high stress, anxiety, or changes in routine? A pattern that can be common in ADHD. One may be a fundamental part of the underlying biology. The other may be a consequence of the dysregulation. Research now clearly shows that ADHD and autism very often co-occur. Some studies suggest that up to 70% of autistic individuals also show symptoms of ADHD. This massive overlap is exactly why a professional evaluation is not just important, it's essential. These signs are your clues. They are the notes you take to a developmental pediatrician or a child psychologist. They are the start of a conversation, not the final word. What did you think? Did any of these signs trigger an aha moment for you? Share your experiences in the comments below. Honestly, reading through each other's stories is one of the most powerful ways we can support each other in this community. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content to help you navigate the world of neurodiversity. And be sure to check out our other video right here on the surprising overlap between ADHD and anxiety. Thanks for watching.